The poem in Mrs. Tilcher's Class, written by Caroline Duffy, explores several themes. Two of the themes include innocence and change and life transitions. This poem is based off of Caroline's personal experiences going to school growing up. Mrs. Tilcher is actually one of her teachers that she had as she was in school. The fact that she was able to use her in one of her poems proves that she had affected her life in a serious matter. This sentence right here is a very long, ongoing sentence, which refers to the river Blue Nile, representing how they were going along the path of the river. It also shows how Mrs. Tilcher chanted, also referring to how when you were in middle school, once the teacher would say something, it would be normal or common for the students to repeat it back to the teacher. There is also representation here of the chalkboards that were used back in the day to teach classes and lessons. Right here, when it says rubbed into dust, it's also referring to the dust that comes off of the chalk as you're writing on the chalkboard. There is use of personification in this line right here where it says the laugh of a bell, almost as if the bell is laughing, obviously, which is not. And there's also a sense of innocence when it follows with by a running of a child. The first sentence of the second stanza begins with "This was better than home." With the usage of the word better than home, it shows how Caroline Duffy felt more comfort at school in Mrs. Tilcher's class than she did in her proper home. It then followed with saying enthralling books. This shows how intriguing and interesting the books were to the students, and it also shows an early sign of Caroline's love for literature. The second line in the stanza is "The classroom glowed like a sweet shop." This is a simile referring to obviously a sweet shop, which normally as kids grow up, their favorite place to go is somewhere where there's sweets, which also represents how much they've actually loved this classroom and how much they love being taught by Mrs. Tilcher. It then continues with the innocence where it says sugar paper and colored shapes. You think of a beautiful image, you're not thinking of anything harsh. It then follows with Brady and Hindley, which, based off of research, are two people who murdered children, turning the tone of the poem a little less cheerful to a little more dark. The way that this is presented into the poem shows how there are often times where children are aware of the bad things that are happening in either their personal life or in the outside world, but it does go away after a while, seeing as it's something that is easily forgotten for them. It then follows by saying how Mrs. Tilcher loves them, referring to the students, and it proves how they're 100% sure that their teacher loves them and she's devoted to them, which also continues saying she'd left a good gold star by your name, showing how kind and caring that she is towards her students. When the gold star is mentioned, it's talking about the approval that the students are seeking from Mrs. Tilcher, showing how their approval means so much to them. There are also memories that the reader could also relate to as they read this poem. For example, when it says, "The scent of a pencil slowly, carefully shaved," can be reminiscent to some of the readers as they remember some of the things that they've done in the middle. The third stanza begins with "The inky tadpoles changed," which refers to a biology lesson that is taught while you're in school, where you are examining the changes that the tadpoles are going through. With the use of the words commas, with the use of the word from commas into exclamation marks, it refers to the change that the tadpoles are going to and how they're evolving over time. It creates a very detailed image on how the tadpoles look. Eventually, these tadpoles do turn into frogs, but after this is when the tone changes to a little bit more of a serious and uncomfortable look once it starts talking right here where it says dunce, often referred to someone stupid, and croaking, which is a very unpleasant sound, and then it mentions a rough boy told you how you were born. With this enjoyment right here, it refers to how shocked and uncomfortable / disgusted that the poet felt once she figured out what the boy meant. It then continues to say that she kicked him, referring to how, shocked she was and how appalled with this strong word choice right here, obviously backing up the thing, saying how she was shocked and she was kind of disgusted in a way, seeing as her innocence was just taken away from her because she now knows the reality of how children are brought into this world. In the beginning of the fourth stanza, there is a little bit of a discomfort kind of tone represented from the poet, whereas in the beginning there was a little bit more of a calmness to the poem. In the second line of the fourth stanza, it says, untidy, hot fractions. You could use this to refer to as the emotions that people or young children have growing up as they go through their changes in life, and you can see as they are rising more and more over time. It then continues to say, you asked her how you were born, referring to Mrs. Tilscher, her teacher, but she did not answer and she just walked away. This shows how the relationship between Carol Ann and Mrs. Tilscher kind of drifted apart. The reasoning behind why they drifted apart was because Carol Ann realized that her teacher doesn't always have all of the answers that she is looking for. It goes on to say, reports were handed out, meaning that the school year is finally over, following with through the gates, meaning they're leaving school, which then continues to say impatient to be grown, meaning that there's anticipation and excitement to the childhood that is now being left behind and growing into someone as a young adult, which then the last sentence of the stanza and of the poem says, as the sky split open into a thunderstorm, could represent the emotions that Carol Ann was feeling as she, lost a sense of innocence after this school year.